Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this episode of the Better World Challenge podcast. I'm thrilled to bring to you this interview with Eric Boggs, the director of the Business Honors Program at University of Oregon. Eric Boggs has so much leadership experience. He talks about the importance of dialogue and working towards a common goal. If you're interested in leadership and leading to build a better world, this is going to be a great episode for you. So, let's dive in. Hi, I'm Justin Furtado, a social entrepreneur with a passion and experience in community engagement and philanthropy located in Eugene, Oregon. It's our responsibility to take care of our communities, have uplifting conversations, and make the world a better place. You're listening to the Better World Challenge podcast. Welcome to the Better World Challenge podcast. Eric, it is great to have you on. It's great to see you. My first question for you is, what inspires you when you get out of bed in the morning?
Rainy Oregon mornings, Justin. What's the E.B. White quote? I rise each morning torn between the desire to improve the world and the desire to enjoy the world. And this makes it hard to plan the day. That resonates with me a lot. I think about each morning, how can I learn something about myself or get better in a little way? How can I learn something about other people, a colleague, a student? And how can I do a little thing to kind of reach the summit to actualize my goals for improving our community, even just a tiny community?
Absolutely, and I'm sure we'll talk about those leveling up and stages as we go along in this podcast. And you are currently the director of the Business Honors College at the University of Oregon, and you teach a lot about leadership, resilient leadership, and there's storytelling in your bio and resume. My question for you is, can you tell us about your leadership journey to get to where you are now?
Yeah, my career makes a lot of sense looking backwards, Justin. But had you told me 20 years ago that I would be teaching in a business school, I don't know that I would have believed you. So, as an undergrad, I studied environmental studies, and that really immersed me in the plethora of problems across the globe, locally in Oregon, globally through my international travels and study abroad. And that for me was really overwhelming to be engaged in that academic discourse of how many challenges the world faced. Simultaneously, I was doing a lot of outdoor adventures for the college outdoors program. And through that, I really enjoyed connecting with people, building community, learning what leadership looked like for others, and myself practicing. And so those two passions or interests merged out of undergrad, and I got my dream job working for the National Outdoor Leadership School, NOLS, leading wilderness expeditions. So a month in Arctic Scandinavia, a 3-month long semester in Chilean Patagonia, sea kayaking, mountaineering, and working with people, working with groups of strangers to help them become a team, to help them learn more about themselves, to learn more about others in pursuit of this common goal. And sometimes that was to get to the top of a mountain or to kayak around a distant island, to circumnavigate it. And in those challenges, I learned a lot about how to teach leadership, how to facilitate dialogue, how to get people safely out of their comfort zone so they could experiment and take risks and learn in pursuit of goals. With the idea that by connecting people with the wilderness, we might inspire a next generation of environmentally aware, motivated leaders that could help preserve these places and take actions in their lives that would improve sustainability in general by connecting those places. And I did that for 8-9 years full time, changing continents with the seasons. My pickup truck was my home, and eventually I got a little tired and a little worried. I got tired of moving so much, about building community and having it disappear. And I got worried that when I was, an old man at 41 years old, that maybe my shoulder would hurt and I'd be stuck I wouldn't know what to do. So I moved to Eugene, Oregon, and I pursued a master's degree in education and followed that up with a master's degree in geography while teaching at an outdoor high school for high potential, low opportunity youth. Oftentimes adjudicated teens, students that had been kicked out of other high schools. And there we built a place-based curriculum. So how could we learn social studies by walking through the graveyard? How could we learn science by doing stream sampling? That type of stuff. And after 4 or 5 years at this outdoor high school, I found an opportunity to lead expeditions again, to do leadership workshops, and do international travel, learning service expeditions. And that was at the Holden Center where you and I met. And that was a great time in my life, designing these experiences akin to how I would try to design them when I was in the wilderness, but they were shorter, they were week-long opportunities. And I really enjoyed that because you'd work with a group of students like you, maybe in their first year of school, and then you'd get to see them day in, day out, maybe every week, and get to hear about their journeys and see how those little experiences had a ripple effect on their lives. And after 5 years of doing that, I moved over to the College of Business, where I'm now the director of the Business Honors Program, and I help scaffold and coach, scaffold a 2-year experience for leadership development for a cohort of 35 students. So we have a total of 70 students, but kind of they're in 2 classes. And then I also teach. I teach courses on leadership for undergrads and MBA students, and then I do workshops and trainings here and there as needed across the university. And I also have my own corporate consulting business where I do these types of simulated expeditions, leadership adventures for organizations like Google's next generation marketing development team or a Technology Association of Oregon. I built these communities and help people have experiences that help them talk about leadership so they can learn about themselves, learn about others, and maybe make a difference in the world.
Yeah, make a difference in the world. I love that. And it sounds like you have a plethora of leadership opportunities. And I want to kind of go back to a little bit more of your earlier journey, maybe with
Yeah.
Knowles, where you were,
Mhm.
traveling internationally. Like you said this word common goal, which, kind of stuck with me is like how as humans can we work together towards a common goal?
Yeah.
Especially when you're in, international environments. I'm sure there are people from all over the world. And like, how are you building a community with people with such different backgrounds and creating a space where people want to belong?
Yeah, that's a great question, Justin, and a tough one to answer concisely. When we go on an expedition or we go to another place, we have this opportunity to be very intentional about what we take with us. Literally, you got to pack it in the backpack, and figuratively. So we ask participants to think about what they want to bring with them and what they want to leave behind. And throughout the experience, we have conversations that help us gather well, as Priya Parker would say. We have this opportunity to create a temporary alternative world. We're on an expedition away from everything, cell phones are gone, and we ask people to embrace behaviors that we know will make for a successful expedition. Diversity is what we are, inclusion is what we do. How can we be inclusive? How can we learn from different styles? How can we listen to others? How can we support each other? Because an expedition is literally, viscerally, physically a very challenging experience. It might be cold, it might be rainy, and all of us are going to show up in our worst selves and hopefully our best selves as well. And so a lot of framing, a lot of conversation, and a lot of one-on-one feedback and peer feedback, which is not something that we often get a chance to do, is to have that candor between each other about how I'm seeing you, how you're impacting me, that type of thing.
Yeah, it's that peer feedback, and you talk a lot about vulnerability in your work, and it is difficult when you're in the backcountry and it's cold, it's rainy, you don't want to get out of your tent, you don't want to, cook breakfast or cook dinner or whatever it may be, but it's part of you got to take care of yourself. And I think,
Yeah.
being in the backcountry really forces you to almost level up and, it's so community oriented because you're really like,
Mhm.
you have to rely on each other. And I think that's a wonderful thing. And I'm really curious, how do you invite vulnerability and move it from the back country to now you're teaching online, and how do
Mhm.
you know, approach vulnerability like with online learning and communication?
Yeah, it's a great question, and admittedly something that I was nervous about stepping into spring term. How could I create a similar environment to the classroom, knowing that my classroom often more looked more like a campfire than it did a traditional lecture class. And so I bring these kind of this expedition mindset, I call it. I frame the course as a journey that we're going on together. And I talk about some of my personal experiences on how vulnerability and candor and inclusion really are the secret sauce to a successful expedition. It's not about individual performance, it's not necessarily about perseverance, it's about this adaptability and dialogue between us. So, concisely, I do it through modeling, I do it through an invitation, and then I do it through framing and sequencing, meaning that at the beginning of the course, I'm not going to be like, Justin, tell me your personal worst leadership moment. Tell me your deepest fear. Tell me your crucible. But we have little warm up questions. What's good right now? What are you grateful for? And what's holding you back? What's the gravel in your boot that if you don't take it out, it's going to give you a blister right now? And so we got to build up to that. And this spring, I was astonished. I had a group of wonderful MBA students. Our last class was of a story slam, if you will, where each person got to talk for 3 minutes. And I was holding back tears and getting hair standing up on my arms, and people were all in, eyes open, as they say. They weren't just blindly jumping in, but they were engaged and supportive of one another, and people felt comfortable bringing authentic self to the experience. And I was blown away.
I think bringing in the authentic self is so important when it comes to leadership. And I want to honestly go back and just ask the question, like, what does leadership mean to you? I know a lot of times you shared a few articles on LinkedIn recently about
Mm-hmm.
how, when people envision a leader, it's often a male. And
Mm-hmm.
I know NASDAQ just changed some rules where there's a diversity requirement, because often in these corporate boardrooms where leadership, it's white males. So how can
Mm-hmm.
we kind of reframe our leadership, and especially for someone listening, maybe who doesn't
Mm-hmm.
consider themselves a leader, how can we break down some of these leadership stereotypes?
Yeah, it's a great question, and maybe you should take my class, Justin. You can still register. I think with leadership, learning leadership, we have to unlearn a lot about leadership, meaning that we all tend to think to couple leadership and a position. We think of leadership and we think about power, we think about influence, we think about a CEO. And leadership is an action that, or a behavior that anyone is capable of and can be learned. Kuzes and Posner say that in their leadership challenge. And a book I didn't know existed when I was leading kayak expeditions, but something that I very much learned to believe. And so leadership is something that anyone can do on an expedition or in a classroom. Leadership can be self care, making sure that you're prepared to lead others. Leaders can be listening. Leaders can be um, prototyping or brainstorming. And so it's hard for us to conceive of leadership as so many things because we're hungry for a simple answer. My simple but complex answer is that leadership is about an awareness of self. What's my style? What are my strengths? How can I get better? What am I working on? An awareness and understanding of others. So that diversity of leadership identity, both in terms of demographics and style. So we may have different leadership styles, right? That I tend to be outgoing and loud, and you may be quiet and introverted, but we can both lead that way. So those two things: awareness of self, awareness of others, and then in pursuit of a common goal. So a summit, a change, right? An improvement, a better world, if you will.
Absolutely. And so my question is, obviously 2020 was one of the most divisive years. I mean, it also might be one of the years where I like am a little bit more cognizant of what's going on. But
Yeah.
2020 to me seemed like a very divisive year, and it doesn't feel like a lot of times we have a common goal. How do we, come to a place where we can share a common goal of like building a better world and seeing a more equitable and inclusive world, especially when it comes to leadership?
Empathy. It's hard. I think it's a really, really hard time. And I'm over, we're all over the platitudes, this turbulent time, unprecedented year. It's been a lot. And particularly when we feel afraid, when we feel anxious, when we feel grief, when we feel threatened, as many members of our community may in this tumultuous year with racial violence and extrajudicial police killings, and it's hard to empathize with others. And it's hard to empathize with somebody who has a different worldview than you, and to try to understand and to try to listen. And so I believe that leadership in these times requires this really brave empathy and listening to others so that you can try to find common ground.
Finding common ground is so important, and I do believe empathy starts with it because we all share our different experiences, and I think that's one of the really cool parts about being human. And obviously 2020 has provided an enormous amount of challenges. I'm curious, what are some of the lessons, takeaways, experiences you've had in 2020 as we move into 2021 that you're taking with you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think a big one that I've learned through facilitation this year, and I've been amazed by the power of it, is dialogue. Listen to understand, and as opposed to waiting for your turn to be as interested in the stories of others as you are in your own story. And that dialogue can be really powerful transformation for us, because in a story well told, the speaker is actually transported to that same moment where they had that experience. Right? If you look at the neurology of storytelling, that story well told, their brain scans show that the speaker is actually there, man. They were there. And when they're doing it really well with story structure and voice and emotion, the listener is engaged in a similar way. So their brain, they're getting the same cocktail of chemicals that the speaker is experiencing. And so through storytelling, we can really learn to experience what others have experienced. And that's a really powerful tool for behavior change, and for empathy and understanding.
What are some of, sorry, what are some of the ways that you see, people can like, how can I get better at storytelling, or how can a listener get better at storytelling and telling their story for change or for a common goal?
Yeah, there's a lot out there, and I'm happy to send you a reading list, or you can follow me on Twitter, Boggs_E. I tweet all about storytelling. And for me, it's the telling of the story that has helped me learn more about it. In 2015, I had a house fire, and it was devastating. The house didn't burn down, but everything was smoke damaged. And I found myself standing in front of the Holden Center with a cup of coffee, and a friend of mine asked me, "How are you?" And I just paused for a long time. On one hand, I could tell them that I was a hot mess and my house just burned down, and I didn't really know what I was doing at work, and I was really overwhelmed and risk overwhelming them. And on the other hand, I could say, "I'm fine," and act like I was invisible and that my slack jaw, wide open mouth, bugged out eyes weren't showing. And I found some common ground. And I said, we're going through a really challenging time right now, but I'm grateful to be supported by family and friends and community. And if they asked more, I would tell them more. And so I told this story again and again. And through it, I learned what it felt like to be heard by somebody who could really see me and say, "Oh my gosh, that's really challenging." And then there are people that would say, "How did it start?" Or be like, "Oh, crazy," and walk away. And so I felt felt like to be heard, and then what it felt like to not be heard. Right? So that difference between empathy and sympathy, and through that, I learned a lot about my own listening, right? My own listening, and how I hadn't always been a great listener. And so that's the long answer to practice. So if you think that you have a story that you want to tell, you need to think about why. And Barry Lopez has a great quote on this. I'll try not to butcher it too much, but that authentic stories are really about, do they benefit us? Do they benefit others, as opposed to just benefiting ourselves?
I love that. Benefiting the common goal. And my final question for you is, I love storytelling, and, I can ask how storytelling, how can that make us a better world? But what does a better world full of resilient leaders who are sharing their vulnerable stories and fighting for a common goal look like to you in 2021?
I hope for dialogue, Justin. I hope that we can have dialogue across difference, that we can invite different opinions and not just send mean tweets to each other, or have this kind of one-uppance that has relegated our community and cultural conversations to not listening, to not dialogue. My hope is that through that listening, that we can make more equitable shifts in the way that our society works. And when I'm thinking about equity, I'm thinking about not humans, of course, and making sure that citizens have equal rights and opportunities. We have access to health care, and also thinking about how we think, the triple bottom line, right? How can we uphold the systems, the living systems that support our lives and our planet and everything on it.
100%. I couldn't
Yeah.
agree with you more. Thank you so much for your time today, Boggs. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I'm feeling good about 2021. Let's have some more dialogue.
Thank you, Justin. Appreciate you and what you're doing. Have a great day.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Better World Challenge podcast. I hope you're feeling inspired right now. To find out more about how you can make the world a better place, check out our website at thebetterworldchallenge.com. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, because together we can really make the world a better place.